Smith said, no, that's a matter for BART's general counsel. That's not really independence if you're just referring back to the general counsel. I'll go ahead and close with that and just thank you for holding this hearing.
Thank you very much for your participation. And while any legislation, we want to be extremely deliberative about, certainly it is a strong option if there will be future legislation. So, sir?
Yes. I'm Cephas Johnson, Oscar Grant's uncle, and I do want you to know that I really stood in favor of your AB, I think it was 386 at that time. But one of the things I do want to share, actually was for a topic for the sake of time. I'll try to just be as brief as I can. It was 4 topics. One was, of course, training. One was bias-based policing, racial profiling. The other was community confidence. And the other, of course, was civilian oversight. I'm going to start with civilian oversight because we heard, I think it was Nancy had mentioned about the culture. And my problem is this, is that, and I'll read from the original draft from Noble 2, it says, the process of establishing an independent citizen oversight system for BART Police Department should be developed at a pace sufficient for proper planning and should not be established solely because of urgent and vocal demands of the community. And that community should be X'd out and it should be BART. Because the reason why we have the Oversight Committee Form 1586 today was because of a rush to get it passed before January 1st. And knowing what I know now and understanding the essence of some political moves that are made, I would have never agreed with that. And I think it passed solely because of somewhat of the family agreeing to just getting something passed without teeth, and then later we'll build upon it. Well, I'm looking at this now as an opportunity to build upon this teethless oversight committee that we have. Because truthfully, that's how I see it. And I do believe that your bill would have brought some policies that truly needs to be established. So now I'm going to flip to training because it talks about the essence of how important policies are. And the lack of policies, what we have is just cosmetics, making it seem like things are being done without the establishment of policies. Nothing is really being done internally. And so we need some major changes in that regard. So I'm going to go to page 55 of the original draft, again from Myers-Noble. And one of the things about training that I saw that was really critical and needed was communicational skills. And I'm looking at this training. The trainings are all rehearsed. It's in a controlled environment. So when something happens that requires real thinking in real life, that training goes out the window. So my thought was, we need unrehearsed training. How do we establish unrehearsed training? Well, someone in the community approaches an officer, a BART police officer, without his knowledge and bring up some issues that may cause him to react. And we'll see if he's truly trained. I mean, this, to me, will begin to understand what type of training these officers truly need. Because as we know, in a controlled environment, the country boogie versus boogie, and the type of training when it comes to taser, confrontation, use of force, is all easily done and look right in a room that's closed off to the community. So it has to be really addressed in the respect of unrehearsed training. And I think BART needs to take a look at that because, like David, my colleague, said, that when BART can pay for scripted rehearsing to make their appearance look good, then we got issues. Now, I have to say, I have a relationship with Chief Rainey, and he's a very great chief policeman. Personally, I truly like him, and I believe in his heart he wants to make changes. I've come to know Rod, who is BART public relation officer, who has really communicated with the family and has worked with the family. And then, of course, the new general manager had just sent out word that she would like to meet me personally. So I believe that there are real good intentions, but we're dealing with a culture, an organization that needs to be changed from top to bottom in its culture perspective. And this, I can run on with this, but this thing about wanting to look good to the community at all costs is shameful. And many times it gets caught in it, and it builds that distrust with the community again. So if I move on to bias policing, bias-based policing and racial profiling, Myers-Noble had put this out, and I thought this was really significant, 122. And matter of fact, I heard you talk about it earlier, and it's data. Okay, I'm going to read. BARC Police Department was unable to provide data which captures and identifies all police contact, time, date, location, vehicle, pedestrian, consensual or not consensual. The limited data provided indicates a disproportionate number of traffic contacts with African American and Hispanic Americans. However, comparing only race data severely limits the opportunity to calculate the multiple correlations between and among factors associated with traffic stops and field investigation. You know, that's because it says here from Myers-Noble, current application and practice, BARC Police Department does not currently have a racial profiling policy in effect for the department to adhere to, nor in the history of the department have they had one. And so I didn't hear earlier if there was one established since this draft, and still to my knowledge, I don't believe there is one. And so here we go. You know, in order for an organization that has the shameness that BARC has, there has to be policies established. And I'm truly believing now AB 386 would have laid down some policies that BARC would have had to adhere to that would have really brought more assurance that a possible shooting by mistake or by profiling or bias policing wouldn't have happened. And so that is my concern. Again, with the civilian oversight, what teeth does it have to help bring about the policies that are needed to bring about these changes? And of course, that's right now in suspect. I'm in total agreement, and it's shameful that, you know, and it's no disrespect to the individual that was an ex-police officer, but it's my position, he should not be on the board or the committee. That's my position. I don't know how he slipped in there. You know, that's another aspect of the story. But as a family member, and in hoping that the community can come with this unbiased policing training and maybe even belief that all police officers are good, should not taint the committee. That's my personal belief. You know, and there's no disrespect to the individual because he may be one of those good officers, but sad to say, right now the perception is there's not many good ones, even though we know there is, but because the bad ones has been able to just do what they want, it makes all of them look bad. And so it raises the question. Yep. And I go to this very last one, which is the community confidence. And I think David elaborated on it very well, and that was, when it can get out, like you said, and I've heard you say, we hear it on the news, that BARC will go pay for scripted people to come and share their opinion in a more positive light for BARC as an organization. It's shameful. And it totally discredits BARC and its ability to really show itself as being an organization about change and for the betterment of the community. You know, and so I think I'm going to want to close with that. Oh, I do have one other part that I'll share that to me was needs to be addressed. And I think it still needs to be addressed today because it could become a real major issue later. When the protesting are taking place, no BARC employee outside of the BARC police force should touch an individual in the crowd. That should be an absolute no termination, no questions asked. And by looking at the news and seeing a BART employee grabbing an individual, though he may have climbed up on top of the BART, you know what I'm saying? But if he had pulled that individual down, that individual fell and cracked his head open and died. Another shameful act on BART's part. Yes, he may not have should have been up there, but BART was wrong for allowing that employee to just do and become a hero as if he was becoming a hero by saving BART. You know, and so I think I will close with that. There's much more I can talk about. I do have one individual who couldn't be here, but he wanted to share his sentiment concerning this public safety meeting that we're having, if we can.
Do you have a statement?
Yes.
Yeah, no problem.
And excuse me for getting a little excited, but, you know.
Are you kidding? I welcome it.
Give me a minute. It's coming on.
Oh, it's coming on. Okay.
It's on.
Okay. Technology.
And I do thank you for having this today. You know, it's sad that I got the word late, but I made it a point to be here because it's really important that we take a look at the progress that has been made since the Oscar Grant shooting, especially with the recommendation from Noble as well as Myers and Nave. And again, I think that cosmetically there is some stuff that has been changed, but internally there's much work to be done.
I think, you know, in regard to your nephew and to the others and the BART police, we are pledged to respect those memories, and we don't want it to happen again. And it is very possible in a system like this that things slip between the cracks. And I mean, I commend you because it really is a duty of the populace to say to us, you're on the right track, but you're going this way. You do have a mental, you know, if you have a mindset about a certain ethnic group, that is going to creep in to your actions. And so if there's not a policy around that, we're going to see the country boogie, the boogie. It's really a wonderful analogy because people get it right away, but it's very deep. It's very, very deep. Okay, for this statement.
And for this statement, this is from Minister Keith Muhammad, who had been at many of the BART meetings. So he shares here, the recent shooting of Charles Hill in San Francisco brings us face to face with the attempted reform of BART police and its system of oversight. We learned with Oscar Grant murder by BART officer Johannes Mesley that police do not investigate themselves and report themselves for crime committed on duty. This is why I, after spending hours in committees with BART board members to develop a system of oversight, I'm greatly disappointed to learn that a month after the killing of Charles Hill, its review board is still waiting to take action. The role of the independent auditor was to include the ability to conduct a fully independent investigation and give findings to the board for review. Has this happened here? It appears that BART police want us to believe an investigation by San Francisco Police Department is an independent investigation. I disagree. We need oversight and investigation outside the authority of local law enforcement. We need a true independent investigation of the facts. We did better in Oakland because the community marched into the office of the district attorney, elected official, and community leaders, cried out for justice, not because the system of justice were friendly, but because the demands of the public could not be ignored. We cannot ignore the need for an independent investigation into the killing of Charles Hill or any other BART passenger. And that was from, again, Keith Muhammad, Minister Keith Muhammad.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody, and particularly Assembly Member Skinner, who has some closing remarks.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of your presence and your public comment, and I'm very sorry that, especially to you, Mr. Johnson, that these incidents, I mean, you will, of course, I lost a sister this year, so I know that our memories about loved ones who pass and their circumstances are continually, they come before us continually, but to have further public incidents force those is particularly hard. So I am sorry that those public incidents continue to happen and you're having to confront that. And I wanted to just express again that clearly Mr. Amiano's legislation, which, as I indicated, I thought was a better piece of legislation, but it was really motivated out of not only that models have worked in the past, but also out of our chair's frustration for the years that he has observed that the corporate culture of BART was not responsive or appropriate, was not designed in the way that I think now most of us would like it to be, or even the Bay Area community as a whole. But I would say now that while the legislation was not successful, and sometimes trying to force such a corporate culture, whether it's legislatively or otherwise, doesn't always work, I think now clearly the onus is on BART. The onus is on the force itself, on the board, on the new manager, and of course, yes, on the citizen review. But the BART as a whole has the ability, without us forcing them to change its corporate culture. And I think that's what we are expecting, and that's what we are asking for. And it's not easy. And I believe that the chair and others felt that you might have been aided by stronger legislation, and we may, we'll have to see in the future whether that's necessary or not. But you have the power to do it. You have the ability. It's not, it won't happen overnight, but certainly it's something that can happen and is within BART as an organization's ability to do. And I think on this issue of, on the training, we live in a very racist culture. We don't even have to start out thinking that any particular either police organization or corporate organization or whatever is somehow immune from this. It's in our face constantly. It's in, by the nature of our sentencing laws, by the nature of our popular culture, you name it. And so in a funny way, for any of us in any role, whether we're in a legislative role, a public safety role, whatever role, we almost have to be untrained we need to understand how those factors play in. I mean, I'll give you a very specific example. As I mentioned, being on the Berkeley City Council for years, Berkeley in the 60s, 70s, and 80s obviously had many riots. Most of those riots were dominantly Caucasian. They were student riots or People's Park riots, and there were some people of color, but very few. Never in that time period, well, I shouldn't say never, in the late 60s and early 70s, when Ronald Reagan sent the National Guard in, there was curfews and such. But after that point, City of Berkeley never considered a curfew. Even though historically on the anniversaries of People's Park, we could expect a riot. When the times when the anarchist convention would occur in San Francisco, we could expect a riot. So pretty much you could guarantee it, but we did not install curfews. It wasn't until the Rodney King incident that then we were asked to put in a curfew. Why? Because there was concern. Never said, but it would be a racial riot. Now, was that any more dangerous? In our previous riots, we had people killed. In our previous riots, we had damage to property. We had fires. We had violence. So, and I was not comfortable instituting a curfew in that instance when I had never been asked to institute a curfew in any other. Now, if it was the City of Berkeley's policy to institute a curfew every time we knew or could expect that there would have been a riot, I probably would have been more open to it. But these kinds of things just are there. They're just there in our culture. And we almost have to relearn to get over them and to function in a way that doesn't bring out just things that. So I hope that not just hope. I pledge whatever assistance to assist BART in confronting these circumstances that it's facing, in improving its relationships with the community, and with addressing its corporate culture, and in whatever way we can be helpful. We pledge that.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. The meeting is adjourned.